we've got our cloud service, we've got our VNets, and we've got our storage account. So all we need to do now is start creating our virtual machines. Here I'm inside the Azure portal, and we can see a list here of all the items that I've got created inside my subscription. What I want to do is go to the virtual machine section, and through here we can see a list of virtual machines and their current status. Now we're going to be creating a new virtual machine. So from the bottom left hand side of the screen we say new, and we say virtual machine. Now here we've got two options. We've got quick create and from gallery. Quick create offers some basic choices, but most of the major decisions around creating the virtual machine will be made for us. What we're going to do is say from gallery. Now when the gallery opens, we get a list of builds that we can select from. Now each of these builds include the virtual machine and its operating system. And for those of you thinking about licensing, when we select one of these builds, it comes complete with the relevant operating system and software licenses. Sometimes you may have to agree to a licensing agreement once you've selected the image that you want. Now, my list includes images like Server 2012, 2008. We've got the new Windows Server Technical Preview there as well. As we scroll down the gallery, you will also see builds of SQL Server, as well as things like Oracle, and towards the bottom, Dynamics, Visual Studio, and eventually we see here things like Linux versions as well, versions of Linux. Now the items you see in the gallery might be different to mine. It will depend on your subscription level and whether you've got an MSDN subscription or not. Now these images provided to us by Microsoft and third parties. You can also upload your own images as well, and we'll sort of approach that in a later video. For now, I'm just going to choose Windows Server 2012, and we'll choose the R2 Data Center Edition. Now, for each image Microsoft provide, they will keep it patched. So on the version section, or in the version section, you click drop-down list. We have different release dates. And we can see a release that was done on the 11th of February 2015. That's the current release version, so that's the currently patched, most up-to-date version, and that's the version I'm going to select, but you can choose previous versions if you want. And then the virtual machine name. Now the virtual machine name needs to be unique on your subscription, so we'll call this test MGB1. We'll call this. Now, one of the big decisions you have to make when creating a virtual machine is the size of the virtual machine, and it starts off by choosing a tier option, basic or standard. If we choose basic, we can see a list of then virtual machine sizes, standard, an even bigger list of virtual machine sizes. Now when you choose basic or standard, that's pretty much a decision that we have to decide now, but the actual size option of the virtual machine can be changed at a later time within certain parameters. So we can choose any of these right now. The bigger the image, the more expensive it will be. So what you might want to do is start off relatively small, see if that size of virtual machine suits your needs. If it does, great. If not, you can change the size later on. There's also pricing guides on Microsoft's website where you can see rough costs of each of these builds. It'll show you how much it costs per minute to run each of these builds. Now I'm going to choose a small A1, so 1 core and 1.75 gigabytes of memory, and then a user account. So this user account will be the admin account on this machine. So we choose an account and provide a complex password to use as well. It won't let you use things like pass or word or any of the standard passwords that you might have picked up on a Microsoft course, but choose some. So choose something that's unique and complex. This will be your admin account, and if you were to put this machine to be a domain controller, this account will also become the domain admin as well. Now, so the very next screen then, that we can start to take advantage of some of the building blocks that we've already created. So from the cloud services, we can choose the cloud service we created. Now that cloud service was in Western Europe, which is good. And we can choose a storage account that we created as well. As well as the cloud service and the storage account, we can also choose our VNet, our virtual network that we created. Notice, because I've chosen the cloud service, the regions are sort of removed. My only region available is Western Europe. Not that we're choosing a region from this drop-down box. But because we've created the cloud service, the VNet, the storage account all in the same region, they can all be chosen on this screen. Now, when we've chosen the VNet, it brings up the virtual network subnet box, and because there are two subnets in this VNet, I can choose the most appropriate one for my virtual machine, and I will choose the net one. Now, availability sets we're going to be talking about a little bit later on in a later video, but availability sets are used to guarantee a level of availability. So if I have two IIS machines, for example, running the same website, I can place them in the same availability set, which would guarantee then that they will be placed on different physical servers at Microsoft Data Center. With that in mind, only one of those physical servers will be updated at any one time, meaning that we've got a minimum level of performance. But we'll talk much more about availability sets in a later section. Now, as we scroll down here, we see endpoints. Now, remember, your virtual machine is connected to a cloud service, is installed inside a cloud service, and that cloud service will have a virtual IP address. The virtual IP address is a public address that represents your cloud service. Now, that public address will accept incoming communication, but only on ports that you've identified as endpoints. Now, for each virtual machine, two endpoints are created. We get a remote desktop endpoint and a PowerShell endpoint. For each of the images that we choose from the gallery, the remote desktop feature is turned on, and this will allow us to RDP into the virtual machine using the account that was previously created. Because the PowerShell endpoint, it allows us to invoke remote sessions on the virtual machine as well, once we've installed the appropriate PowerShell modules and we've downloaded and trusted the appropriate management certificates. But if this virtual machine was running a website and you need to add another endpoint, it can be done here or can be done later on through the virtual machine configuration. I will leave these two endpoints. Now I'm happy with all my selections. We say next. We're then asked about the agent extensions. Now, the default there is that the VM agent is installed. This VM agent allows us to run scripts and different programs at boot up time when the virtual machine is starting up. So the one that runs by default is the getinfo script that will then display the info of your virtual machine when you sign in. We can also enable other extensions well for other scripting languages, automation, tools, anti-malware, and again these extensions can be enabled now or later on. Now I'm happy with my selection. I'm going to leave the VM agent selected, and we just tick now to complete the creation of the virtual machine. And you can see there my virtual machine is provisioning, and that's going to take a little bit of time to provision and start up. So I'm just going to pause the video for a minute, and then once this VM has been provisioned and started, we'll come back. This process normally takes between 5 and 10 minutes. We're back. Our test VM has been created now, and as you can see, its status is running. Before we take a look at that virtual machine though, I've got several other virtual machines that are also configured on my subscription. One of the virtual machines is also running. The others say stopped and in brackets deallocated. Stopped and deallocated. Now, when we've got a physical machine, we're quite used to powering the machine up and then just shutting it down when we're finished. With virtual machines, there's one more thing to think about. If I was to connect to one of my running VMs and from inside there just shut down the VM would go to a stopped state. Now when a virtual machine shows as stopped, you are still paying for that virtual machine. Think of it this way. When Microsoft create a virtual machine for you, they've got to allocate storage for the machine's VHDs in your storage account, but they also have to allocate compute resources as well, so process and memory resources. Now while a machine is running, you are paying for those compute and memory resources, but also while a machine is stopped, you're also paying for them as well. This is because when a machine is stopped, you are still provisioned an amount of space on one of Microsoft's physical servers. They've got to have that space available to you to start up your machine again. When your virtual machine is stopped and deallocated though, it means your virtual machine is not allocated space on one of those physical servers. So you're still paying for the storage of your VHD file, which stores all your virtual machine's operating system data, application data and so on. So you'll always pay for the storage. But when you're stopped and deallocated, you're not paying for the compute time for that machine. So if you're in a test environment and you want to reduce costs where possible when you're not performing your tests and development, then make sure that your virtual machines are placed in a stopped and deallocated state. To do that, you can use the portal, or you can use PowerShell. But if we select a virtual machine, one of our running virtual machines, so if I select this running virtual machine, then from the bottom we can choose shutdown. When we choose shutdown, it shuts down the virtual machine but also deallocates it. That way we're not paying for the compute costs. Now I'm not going to shut down this virtual machine, I need that one running, but hopefully we can see the difference between stopped and deallocated. Let's have a look at our test virtual machine then. So right now we can see it's running. We can see the subscription and location of where the machine was created, and also the name of the cloud service that's running that virtual machine as well. Now we'll take a look at the cloud service in a minute. For now I want to look inside the virtual machine and look at some of its settings. So if we just click on the virtual machine itself, click on the virtual machine itself, we get access to virtual machine properties, and we can start off on dashboard. So here we can see some metrics for the virtual machine. So we can see disk read write time, CPU percentages. So it gives an idea of how much resources our machine is consuming. We can also see here, if on the left hand side, this idea of web endpoint status. Now this is another preview feature. Again, imagine this virtual machine is running a website and you're logged into the virtual machine so you can see that the website is running. But is it available in South America? Is it available in North America? Can people see this resource from different regions? Well, that's what web endpoint status is all about. It allows us to monitor an endpoint that we've created on this virtual machine, but from various different regions, and then gather metrics about that monitoring. A little bit further down, we can see auto scale settings. Now, these auto scale settings we'll be looking at in greater detail later on, but this allows us to configure availability sets and auto scale, which controls the number of instances of this virtual machine that are running at any one time. We can see usage, so we can see how many cores this virtual machine is running out of the total number of cores available on our subscription. Now, out of the box, when you sign up for a trial subscription, you have 20 cores that you can use. If you want to exceed this number of cores, then you need to give Microsoft a ring or send them an email, and they will expand that number of cores for you. We can also see, as we scroll further down, the details of the disks. So this is the name of the VHD file that's running my operating system right now. And we can also see extensions. So each extension is going to be run at boot time. By default, it's the big info extension that runs. Now, there's not a lot we can configure through this section, but it is worth pointing out some of the features on the right hand side. Here on the right hand side, we can see the internal IP address. So 131.107.04. This is the internal IP address assigned to this virtual machine from the VNet that we created. Now, when we created the VNet, we started off the addressing at 131.107.00/16. This is the only virtual machine in this VNet, so it would expect that it be given the first available IP address. And that's exactly what's happened. It has been given the first available IP address. This happens to be number 4. You see, for every VNet you create, the first 3 addresses are reserved. These 3 addresses are reserved for gateway addresses that will be used to connect your VNet to other networks. So addresses 1, 2 and 3 are reserved for those gateways, so the first address we get is 4. This also means that when you're planning your VNets, you have to take this into account, that you will lose these 3 addresses from any range that you create. Above there, we see the public IP address, or public virtual IP address, VIP. This is the IP address that's assigned to our cloud service. And it's this public IP address that we use to gain access to the virtual machine via its endpoints. Now this is how we gain access if we don't have any point-to-site or site-to-site connectivity set up. This virtual IP address still allows us to RDP into the virtual machines. And we'll see more about that virtual machine a little bit later. Then we've got the host name and DNS name of the virtual machine as well. Now this DNS name is the cloud service name. So the FQDN of the VM will be the host name plus the DNS name. And finally the status there, the VM is running. So as we scroll up, we have the monitor section, more statistical information about the virtual machine. We have then the endpoint section. Now this endpoint section shows us the 2 endpoints that were created for us, PowerShell and RDP, and we can see the public and private port assignments. If this was a Linux virtual machine, there'd be no Redbook desktops. You would see a secure shell endpoint created for your Linux virtual machine. It's through here where we can create additional endpoints if we need to open up more ports into our VM, and we will be creating them in a later video. Finally, we get the configure section. Now this is where we can change the size of our virtual machine. Now remember, when we created the virtual machine, we chose it as standard. Well, here we've got standard and basic again. So I created my virtual machine as a standard virtual machine. We can turn it to basic. Now be warned here, there are certain features that are only available on standard virtual machines. They include auto scaling and load balancing. So if you acquire these features, auto scaling and load balancing, then it needs to be a standard tier virtual machine. We can also see here the virtual machine size. So we set ours as a A1, but if I find the virtual machine needs to be made bigger or smaller, we can change that here. Now again, just a little warning, if we change the machine tier or we change the machine size, then it will result in downtime. The machine will have to be restarted and there will be an interruption in service. Finally, we can see the virtual network that we're configured to be on. So if we go back now to the list of virtual machines, and we'll just connect to my VM test MGB1. So the VM selected, from the bottom of the screen we choose connect. Now when we choose connect, it gives a message saying that an RDP file will be made available, and we can see then a link to open up the RDP file. We choose connect, and then we provide the login details. So here we provide the details of the user account we created when we created the virtual machine. And we use that to sign in. Now, you will be presented with a digital certificate at this point. This certificate secures the connection to your virtual machine. This certificate is a self-signed certificate, was created when the VM was created. If you're happy with that, we say yes to continue. I don't see any massive need to change the self-signed certificates for these virtual machines. They can be changed if you want, but self-signed ones for this purpose are more than adequate. So here we've been signed into the virtual machine. Notice the address at the top of the screen identifies our cloud service. We're being redirected now to the RDP endpoint for our virtual machine, and we're now logged in. The profile being created for us, and any second now we're presented with a desktop. So in this video then we have used the building blocks we created in 3 previous videos. So we used our cloud service, we used our VNets, we used our storage account, and then we created a virtual machine into those building blocks. Now, just while my desktop's being created, we just minimize that and go back to our portal. We'll just take a quick look at the storage. We've got our storage account here, and if I select the storage account, remember we created that VHD container. So if I accept the VHD container, we can see there the VHD for the test virtual machine we've created, as well as a status file that records status information about the VM. If we go back and choose cloud services, we can see the cloud service that we created and the fact that cloud service is now running. It's running because it has an object inside there now that's running the VM, and on the dashboard we can see the input endpoints as well as the public virtual IP address. Now, just a little aside about this virtual IP address. This virtual IP address is assigned to us while the cloud service is running. If we stop and deallocate all virtual machines in the cloud service, then the cloud service will stop, and that virtual machine IP address, the VIP, will be released. And then when the virtual machine starts again, we may end up with a new virtual IP address. Under instances of the cloud service, we can see a list of all the running virtual machines. So with these 4 videos then, have a play, create the building blocks, create the first virtual machine, and in our next video we'll talk about some advanced configuration features. So we'll talk about auto scaling, we'll talk about availability sets, and we'll talk about load balancing as well. Thank you.